In spite of the attempts by science fiction writers to include trans and queer identities, their identities are often left up to interpretation. This, in my opinion, leaves a distinct bad taste in my mouth. LGBT characters are often written to act in a way that may reflect their gender identity, but will never definitively say it out loud, whether for plausible deniability or just out of fear of boycotts. This forces LGBTQ characters into a fictional closet, where their queerness is a question of debate. So, in this video, I'd like to explore some examples of this. Cyberpunk 2077 spends a lot of time reflecting on the nature of identity, the power of choosing yourself, and abandoning the establishment. Specifically in the Phantom Liberty DLC, the character Songbird reflects on what she could have done differently if she'd not joined up with the NUSA. Instead of being treated like an actual person, her identity as Songbird, the badass hacker lady, is used by politicians in order to make political gains.
Wouldn't have resorted to this if there was. For Myers, the NUSA, just another weapon in their arsenal. Tool for reaching beyond the black wall. And weapons and tools, they don't get to make decisions or choose to retire.
Her story, at least to me, is very queer-coded, which makes it all the more frustrating that the actual LGBT characters that are in the game are never given the chance to really reflect upon their queerness as much as Songbird is. Case in point, Claire Russell, a trans woman who, in the questline Beast in Me, talks about how her husband Dean would often visit her in the hospital. My issue with this, however, is how small of a thing this is treated as. Trans people, especially trans women, are often alienated from cisgender society via systemic transphobia, general misogyny, and especially in the case of cyberpunk, a commodification of trans identities. This often leads trans people into one of two directions. We either strive to seek the approval from our cisgender peers, try our best to fit in with society, and present hyper-feminine or masculine, or we abandon cisgender society altogether and find community with ourselves, accepting the nature of being outcasts, taking pride in it. This is all to say that Dean's support of her in this moment, such a vulnerable time in her life, would have been mentioned much more than just in passing. The fact that Claire didn't have to earn the acceptance of her peers, that she always had someone with her, would have made it much easier for her to also accept herself. This combines with the fact that Claire is treated with respect by V, however her main driving force is still a man that she lost, contributing to the trope of queer characters having to have tragedy to drive their characters forward. This makes me feel as though her identity as a trans woman is treated as an afterthought, something to put her on the back of the box. She's forced into a glass closet, where she's not really allowed to express herself in any meaningful way. Another franchise that I love, but that also falls into this trope, is Star Wars, funnily enough. Star Wars is known for having a large assortment of LGBTQ characters to choose from cis-gay people to non-binary people to even some pansexual representation in the form of the main characters. However, my gripe with this representation is that pansexuality, at least in Star Wars, is often treated to just be aggressively horny. Adding on to this, Star Wars Squadrons contains a myriad of LGBTQ characters, but the most it goes to portraying them is a mention of Varco Gray's husband and Keo being non-binary. One could easily explore how Varco Gray, being a gay man in a fascistic, hegemonic military, feels about his place within it. Keo's non-binary identity could play a huge role into their reasons for fighting the Empire. So, how do I think that we fix all those? First of all, include more LGBTQ characters, obviously, but this is just a small part of a much larger problem. Queer characters especially are often forced into secondary roles where their queerness is mentioned in passing, including a queer person in a more main role, where we're allowed to dive into the complexities of their identity, would allow us to see ourselves in our favorite medias and franchises. A good way to accomplish this lacking portrayal would be to hire more LGBTQ writers and actors. There are many queer writers who would love to get their hands on Star Wars, Warhammer, Halo, etc. There are amazing voice actors like Voice Quills who can do amazing jobs in both male and female roles. Allowing queer actors and writers to portray themselves allows us to create our own narrative and to show our own humanity, as opposed to straight cis authors choosing to portray our humanity for us. There are obviously a lot more changes that could be done, both societally and systemically, but even with these two things, I think that LGBTQ representation would do a lot better in sci-fi. But, of course, I'd like to hear what you think in the comments. And of course, if you enjoyed, then you can like and subscribe, do all the things. It really helps me out. I hope we'll see better representation in sci-fi in the future, because after all, the future is queer.